In the course of an average life, we spend between 20 and 25 years asleep. But scientists don't know why.
This mystery has perplexed us since the beginning of time. Imagine this, spending 1/3 of your life and not knowing why you do it and what its purpose is. Sleep is one of the greatest mysteries that science is struggling with.
Now, as scientists develop the ability to look inside the sleeping brain, they may be on the brink of a remarkable discovery. It may be that the most important function of sleep is to allow us to dream. In the 1950s, researchers working in the newly emerging field of sleep science began to measure electrical activity generated by the sleeping brain. They soon discovered that sleep was not, as had been previously believed, a time when the mind lay dormant. It turned out that, in fact, the brain went through a series of transformations during sleep. As we fall asleep, our brainwave recordings change. As wakefulness begins to slip away, we become drowsy. This is stage 1 sleep. Gradually, we descend into deeper levels of unconsciousness, stages 2 and 3 sleep. Then, after around 20 minutes, we reach stage 4, the deepest form of sleep, in which the brain lies dormant. Scientists call it slow wave sleep because of the slow undulating brainwave recordings it produces. But then, after 90 minutes, the brainwaves suddenly change. Frenetic, jerky movements appear, indicating a burst of mental activity.
It is an awesome experience. I remember the first time I saw it, I just couldn't believe it. You see these slow, rhythmic patterns just disappear, and it looks as though the person is awake. But the person is sound asleep. And the only thing that you see is jerking movements of the eye muscles. And that's what was called rapid eye movement sleep.
It's hard sometimes if you don't see the eye movements themselves. If you just look at the EEG, the brain waves, you can't tell a REM state from a waking state. It looks just as active as if you were wide awake.
Periods of rapid eye movement sleep emerge with clockwork precision, at 90-minute intervals throughout the night. During these REM periods, the mind is more active than when we're awake. And when the early sleep researchers began to wake people up during the different stages of sleep, the reason for these sudden surges in brain activity became clear.
If you awaken somebody out of stages 3 or 4, and if you ask them what they were thinking, they'll tell you that they were thinking nothing. They were, as far as they could tell, very deeply asleep. REM sleep is different because that's when we do our dreaming.
Michael, wake up. Can you tell me what's been going through your mind now?
Yeah. I was at a circus and was laughing at a clown in a big red suit.
If you wake somebody out of this state of sleep that we call REM sleep, most of the time they'll report a dream. Awaken them out of the non-REM stages, and most of the time they will not report a dream. So there's all this complex thinking going on that the person is able to relate when you get them out of a dream.
That's all I think.
Okay, thank you. You can go back to sleep now.
Sleep researchers rely heavily on our waking memories of dreams. Though it's possible to measure electrical activity in the sleeping brain, no one has yet invented a way to record the dream as it unfolds. But even if these dream reports are made as soon as we wake, they can only ever be a distant reflection of sleeping thought. As we emerge from sleep, the chemical composition of our brain changes rapidly, and for most of us, the dream slips quickly away.
One of the other fascinating aspects of REM sleep, which I think is clearly understudied or underappreciated, is that you have no memory of the event. You wake up from your REM sleep state and the memory of what was in your brain is vanishing, which is very unique. It's different from wakefulness. It's one of the most important differences from wakefulness. You are inventing things. It's totally new images and things that are not real. But these images disappear very quickly after you wake up.
Dream sleep has another characteristic which sets it apart from the other stages of sleep. In deep sleep, though our brains are inactive, it's nevertheless possible for us to move our bodies. Those who sleepwalk do so in deep sleep. But in REM, we're paralyzed. The only muscles we can move are the ones in our chest, which enable us to breathe, and the muscles of our eyes. It's called sleep paralysis, and we all experience it every time we enter REM.
In REM sleep, we go through this process of having these very elaborate dreams and all this imagery, and it's the reality for us at the time. If we're thinking of being kung fu experts, if we're thinking of walking down the street, running across a football field, that's the reality at the time. So we have to have in our biology, if we're going to lie quietly in bed, some means of keeping us in the bed. So Mother Nature has built into the base of our brains this center that says when a dream is about to start and we're going to switch realities, we're going to go into this world of a dream, okay, I'm now going to paralyze you. So dream whatever you want, you're going to stay in bed and not get up and move around.
Sleep paralysis is a protective mechanism, nature's way of making sure we come to no harm when we dream. Its existence is evidence that evolution has gone to enormous lengths to preserve the dream state. But why should dreams be important to our evolution as a species? And when does dreaming begin? Babies spend about 9 hours a day in REM sleep. But no one knows when humans start to dream.
We have no idea when they begin to dream. We know they have very heavy REM time. We don't know when the neural networks are set up and connected well enough to sustain that kind of visual imagery with storyline. But we know that some infants certainly scream bloody murder at night as if they were having a nightmare long before they can tell us about it.
In the womb, the fetus spends most of its time in REM. Though perhaps because it doesn't need protection, sleep paralysis hasn't yet developed.
The majority of the state of the human organism in utero prior to birth is dream sleep. All the kicking and twitching that a pregnant mother feels during the last third of the pregnancy is assumed by most people to be wakeful movements, but in fact, these movements are the twitches of REM sleep.
Babies probably start dreaming before they're born. They can hear. So they probably are processing what they hear in the surrounding environment. A lot of the vacuum cleaner, they'll dream about the vacuum cleaner going on. Everything that they hear in where the mother goes. So I think dreaming begins before we're born.
REM sleep is not confined to humans. It's been identified in all species of mammal, even the largest.
Do animals dream? I don't know. It's hard to question them, to ask them about it. But they do have the physiological capabilities as we understand it. You might surmise that something is going on because physiologically it's identical to what we have. You see the same brainwave patterns, you see the same eye movement patterns, you see the little twitching that's occurring in your dog or your cat during that time.
REM isn't even restricted to advanced animals. The duck-billed platypus has 6 times more REM sleep than humans. It's the most primitive of all egg-laying mammals. It coexisted with the late dinosaurs. This means it's possible that even the dinosaurs had REM sleep. But to know whether dinosaurs dreamt, we'd have to be able to ask them. REM sleep, and quite probably the attendant phenomenon of dreams, is universal. They exist throughout our lives, in humans as well as other species. But does the fact that we all have REM mean that it has some kind of biological function? Could it be that dreams are somehow important to our survival? What would happen, for instance, if we didn't dream? In the 70s, a leading sleep researcher came up with the idea of depriving a group of students of their dreams. In the lab, the students were woken up at the end of each period of deep sleep, just as they were about to enter REM. The researcher found that her REM-deprived subjects began to dream during the day.
The medical students that I worked with, I had a buddy go along with them to make sure they didn't nap during the day, that we accumulated REM deprivation from night to night. And I'd say, well, how'd you make out today? Well, I stayed awake, but there were other images coming between me and the lecturer's face all the time, which means waking imaging was intruding into reality.
It seemed that the urge to dream was so powerful that when deprived of REM, the brain would seek to compensate for its loss, even if that meant dreaming while it was awake. And Dr. Cartwright was in for a second surprise. At the end of the experiment, the students were allowed to sleep normally, without interruption. To her amazement, their sleeping brains took huge amounts of REM, much more than in an ordinary night. It was as if they were catching up on lost dream time.
If you're deprived of REM, you not only miss it, but you make up for it. As soon as you get the next opportunity for ad-lib sleep, you start dreaming sooner. Your first dream will be longer, will be more exciting, and have more rapid eye movements per unit of time. So it looks like you're having a dream bash, if you like, to make up for the famine of not dreaming. So there were some basic questions to answer. Do we need to dream?
I don't see things as occurring just totally randomly in nature. Things unfold for a reason. Everybody dreams every night, several times over the course of the night. People who say they don't dream, what they really mean is that they don't remember any of their dreams. It's so much a part of the biology of every person that if we believe in the evolution of the species towards survival of the fittest, one has to think that it serves some kind of purpose. We might not know its purpose. We have lots of theories and ideas about its purpose, but it's hard to believe that it's just a random occurrence.
But if we need to dream, then why? 40 years on from the original experiments in dream deprivation, we may be about to get an answer. Like any other aspect of human consciousness, dream sleep can malfunction. For the victims of a rare disorder, dreams can burst through into the waking state. Scientists believe that by studying this strange condition, they might find the clue which will help them understand the true function of dreams. This video of 6-year-old Robin Jenkins was made by her parents, Maria and Joe. They were concerned about their daughter's unusual condition. Whenever Robin feels any kind of emotion, she loses all muscle tone and collapses. It means she has to try to avoid any kind of excitement.
Very difficult.
Things like swimming, skipping, playing games, watching television are so hard for her to do. She can't go out to play on her own. She can't ride her bike. There is no fun in her life.
Come on, Robin, can you stand up?
Robin has a REM sleep disorder, known as narcolepsy.
Yeah.
Narcolepsy is caused by the sudden intrusion of REM, or dream sleep, into wakefulness.
Usually we just go to sleep when we want to go to sleep, and REM sleep comes in at special times over the course of the night. But that balance between REM sleep and wakefulness can be defective, in which case REM sleep, which is when we dream, can come bursting into wakefulness at inopportune times. One characteristic of REM sleep is the paralysis. If that characteristic of REM sleep breaks through into wakefulness, what happens? Well, paralysis then breaks through into wakefulness, and our muscles can suddenly go limp.
This loss of muscle tone is called cataplexy. It's the main symptom of narcolepsy.
Cataplexy is usually triggered by a very strong burst of emotion. It can be anger, it can be excitement, it can be laughter. And what happens is then the individual experiences this emotion, and this characteristic of REM sleep comes bursting through, and muscle tone gives way.
Annie Everson developed narcolepsy in her 30s. Before then, she'd led an active life. But now she has 3 or 4 cataplectic attacks every day. And even with a carer, things that the rest of us take for granted, like eating out with friends, can be an ordeal.
I'm completely conscious. I can hear everything. If my eyes are open, I can see perfectly clearly. It's just like a puppet with the strings cut.
All right, we're going into the left.
Like the other victims of cataplexy, Annie has entered a mixed state of consciousness. She's simultaneously awake and in REM. This mixing of wakefulness and REM also gives rise to hallucinations, in which the dreaming of REM sleep spills over into the waking state. These waking dreams make it difficult for many narcoleptics to distinguish between their dream lives and waking reality.
My dream life is as real to me as my waking life. When I wake up, I can't stop dreaming. Sometimes they last through the day. You know, I'm still in the dream. I'm still dreaming it while I'm awake.
Few doctors are trained to recognize narcolepsy. So when patients come to them describing hallucinations, these are often misread as a sign of schizophrenia.
If one doesn't know about narcolepsy, one can misinterpret all these symptoms of narcolepsy. And it's very common for people to think of them as being psychologically based. And narcoleptics are, well, they usually, there's some data, you have to see 20 doctors before it's properly diagnosed, if it ever gets properly diagnosed. It's almost always misinterpreted as a psychological disorder.
In San Francisco, scientists are working to come up with a cure for narcolepsy. Along the way, they may be uncovering some important clues about the function of dream sleep. At the Basic Research Center for Narcolepsy at Stanford University, Dr. Emmanuel Mignot keeps a colony of narcoleptic dogs.
One of the most fascinating aspects of narcolepsy is that it's a genetic disorder. It can be transmitted in families. And in the narcoleptic dog, it's especially obvious. You can breed narcoleptic animals and they all develop narcolepsy. And we can trace this in family. And this can be used to actually isolate the narcolepsy gene. By finding the gene for narcolepsy, we might actually get at the cause of the disorder, the initial defect that produces narcolepsy. And by fixing that, we might actually be able to cure narcolepsy or help the patients in a much more consistent way.
In humans, what makes narcoleptic patients have these episodes of muscle weakness is most typically laughing or being excited, meeting a good friend. But for a dog, obviously, meeting a good friend is a nice experience, but we cannot make them laugh. Then what we give them is good food or play. And this is really good stuff, not for me, but for her. What do you think? Hop. Good. See, here he's trying to avoid the food because it's too stimulating for him.
Just as for human narcoleptics, sexual arousal can be particularly hazardous.
Oh, Bo. Oh, it's not the same thing. Oh. Bo, this is not an X-rated movie. No. Yeah. Sorry.
What's happened?
Oh, I mean, they both got so excited that to see each other, you know. Again, cataplexy in human patients is pleasure. And what is more pleasurable than to meet a good friend than for a dog? Then here, Bo is, as you see, totally paralyzed. He has absolutely no muscle tone. And he cannot move, but he's awake. And this is the paralysis that you experience every night during your REM sleep, except that here it was triggered by seeing Pluto. And you see, he has absolutely no tone left, absolutely nothing. If you take him, there's absolutely no muscle tone left.
One of the most amazing things about narcolepsy is that there is a strange connection with emotions.
Oh.
And this means that there is a connection between emotional behavior and REM sleep. And this is one of, I think, the most intriguing aspect of the disorder.
Mignot believes that the malfunctioning REM sleep of narcoleptics may provide a clue about how dreams work in the rest of us. Since emotion is always the trigger for these unexpected intrusions of dream sleep, understanding its role could be the key to unlocking the secret of REM. Different regions of the brain specialize in different kinds of thinking. By identifying the areas which are most active in REM, it may be possible to find out exactly how the brain is thinking when we dream. When the brain enters REM from deep sleep, it moves from almost total inactivity to a state of near frenzy. But throughout this burst of activity, one part of the brain stays soundly asleep.
In REM sleep, most of the brain is as active as it is in waking, except the most evolutionarily advanced, the most sophisticated areas of the brain, the most frontal areas, which are right in here, where the most sophisticated thinking is done. That's asleep during REM sleep. When these areas are not operating, thinking can be disjointed, bizarre, strange, disorganized, illogical, as it is in dreams.
While the sophisticated brain sleeps, a more primitive region comes to life. The limbic system is frenetically active during REM sleep. It lies in a much older part of the brain, and it's responsible for our emotions. This means that when we enter the dream state, we return to a more primitive, less rational way of thinking. Our emotions take over.
I dreamt I saw my son holding a dead baby.
My sister suddenly appeared before me, and she said to me, "It's really happening this time. It's really happening. I need help."
We made unrestricted, wild, and passionate love.
I thought, but I know you, and you're going to die. Why are you going to die?
Do we need to dream? What's it good for? Is it keeping us safely sane by allowing us to be crazy at night?
There's an old adage that if you have a problem, it's a good idea to sleep on it. Many of us have had the experience of going to bed upset or anxious and waking up the following morning feeling that things are somehow better. Professor Rosalind Cartwright thinks that the changes in mood that occur overnight are not an accident. She believes that while we sleep, the dreaming brain is working to solve our emotional problems. It's common for us to go to bed with some troubling emotion niggling away beneath the surface of our consciousness. Cartwright thinks that when we enter REM, our brain begins to explore this emotion.
The experiences that we have that leave us with some bad feelings overnight or as sleep begins trigger an emotional network that has similar feelings about similar experiences in the past.
In the first period of REM, the dreaming brain taps into this cluster of negative emotions. It then acts them out, or dramatizes them, in the form of a dream. This means that the first dream of the night is likely to be the most disturbing. This bad dream is only the first stage of the dreaming process. In the second period of REM, the brain goes back to work on its emotional problems. But now it begins to explore its memory networks to look for a solution to the problem. As the night goes on, the dreams become progressively less disturbing. And by showing us our fears in a different light, they help us come to terms with them.
If we go to bed worried and upset or angry and have not expressed those feelings and resolved them before sleep, the dreams are opportunities for memory searches for ways to handle those feelings from similar experiences in the past so that we can wake up with mood regulated down, not so angry, not so scared, not so worried, and get up and fight another day.
Dreams keep us psychologically healthy. They do this automatically, without help from the waking mind. Most of the time, it's best to leave our dreams to do their job. No need to analyze or interpret them. But on occasion, our problems become too intense for the dreaming mind to deal with. When this happens, we're unable to move beyond the first stage of the dreaming process. Our dreams get stuck, and the problem is endlessly revisited in the form of a nightmare.
Some problems are not that easily solvable, and one night won't do it. Sometimes we go to bed with a big problem, and we have repetitive dreams. They get stuck in a rut, like a needle on an old record, and you play the same band over and over and over, night after night, dream after dream, saying, I can't get on to the next stage. There's nothing there that helps me.
When she was 21, Colette Donahue was raped by a man she'd come to think of as a friend.
I suddenly realized that the man that was about to rape me had no conscience. He suddenly just snapped and said, this is what you're going to do. And my first reaction was, you can't do this to me. This isn't right. And I realized, it took me a very short time to realize I was reasoning with somebody who did not care what I thought was right or wrong. He just knew what he wanted to do, and he was going to do it. And his act was over, and his real self came through. Because I kept feeling like I should have run. I shouldn't have tried to placate him. I should have done anything I could to get away from it. Because when I was a little kid, I remember I used to say, if anybody ever tries to rape me, I'm going to just tell them, kill me. I'd rather you killed me. And when it came down to it actually being life or death for me, when he was threatening my life, I chose to let him rape me and not kill me.
Years later, Colette was still afraid of men, and she continued to feel guilty about not having fought back against her attacker. She was referred to Dr. Cartwright after she told her doctor that she'd been having a recurring nightmare.
I dreamt that I was in a high-rise on the lake. I looked out the window and I saw a car down on Lakeshore Drive, and I suddenly knew that in that car was a man who was going to be a rapist. I left the building and I went to a restaurant, and I was talking to two women in there and thinking to myself, this is so sad. I'm never going to see them again because I'm going to be killed very soon. I walked outside of the building, and as I was walking along, I saw the young waitress that I had been talking to standing naked with her arms tied over her head, and she was being tortured by them. And I thought, that's what's going to happen to me very soon. They're just doing it to her now. And then they came after me, and I woke up in terror. I woke up before they did anything to me. I always wake up at the exact point that it's about to happen to me, but I know what's going to happen.
The dream had been part of Colette's life for 15 years, ever since the immediate aftermath of the rape.
The scenery would change, in various dreams, but it was always the same theme. I was completely helpless against this person who was going to rape me and torture me and kill me. And I would think, that's him, he's here to get me. The time has come, I have no hope.
When she came to me, she was waking up 3-4 times a night in drenching perspiration, being so frightened that she would have to change pajamas and eventually change sheets.
Dr. Cartwright was convinced that Colette's dreams were stuck at the first stage. The rape was being acted out in the nightmare, but her sleeping mind was unable to construct new dreams to help her overcome the trauma. If Colette was going to be able to put the rape behind her, the dreams had to move on.
What she learned first was, this is your dream. You made it up. You can change it. If you don't like it, become aware of what about it you don't like, and do the opposite. And that's all the instructions I gave her to start with.
Her feeling was that you have the ability to change your dreams and thus change your life. You know, change your waking life. So if you have a feeling of powerlessness or helplessness in dreams, and if you can somehow change that, then you can change your waking life as well. So I told her that I didn't think it was going to work.
Colette was convinced she had no control over the dream, and she didn't know how she was going to change it. But strangely, after a few nights, the dream did begin to change.
It was almost as if Dr. Cartwright's voice was in my dream, that feeling of somebody told me something different. What I was learning from her on a conscious level actually infiltrated into my dream life without me consciously doing it. Instead of trying to placate the person, I would become incredibly angry. And in one, I just bashed the guy's head in. I remember it was with something, it wasn't a very heavy object, and I remember feeling like, well, I haven't done that much, but at least I've done something. And that was very different. I'd never fought back before, and that time I did. And now I no longer have that sort of dream at all. So it's almost as if once I finally fought back or successfully eluded these men, I no longer had to have the dream.
Colette believes that changing the dream helped her to change her life. Without conscious effort from her waking mind, she began to lose her fear of men.
Until I dealt with it, it impacted my life a great deal. I never dated, I didn't do anything. Now I'm married. I didn't think it was ever going to happen, that I would ever trust a man, ever.
Dreams help us to come to terms with our deepest fears. But this may not be their only function. There is evidence that in some circumstances, they may predict events which have not yet taken place. The case of Rose was reported by a leading brain specialist. One night in 1926, Rose had a strange and terrifying dream. She dreamt of angels and statues, and that she herself had become a living, thinking statue of stone. When she awoke the following morning, she found her dream had come true. She had fallen victim to an epidemic known as the sleeping sickness. Apart from a few weeks in the 1960s, when she was briefly brought to life by the drug L-Dopa, she spent the next 40 years almost completely motionless. There are many accounts of dreams which seem to predict illness. Dream specialist Dr. Patricia Garfield has heard several of them at first hand.
I worked with a woman who had a series of dreams in which everyone appeared to be frozen. The the people in the room were like statues. Nobody was moving. It turned out that she had developed a hypothyroid condition and her whole metabolism was slowing down. One pregnant woman dreamt that her mother put her baby, unborn baby, into the freezer. This woman turned out to have a stillborn child. You know, it was something in her body was sensing the coldness of the fetus. Another case that struck me very much was a woman who had dreams, persistently, recurrent dreams about wolves tearing at her stomach. You know, this is a most unusual image. Not many people have such a dream. And shortly after this, she was diagnosed with stomach cancer.
These kinds of accounts seem far-fetched, perhaps just the result of coincidence. But sleep experts believe there's a scientific explanation for these dreams. During REM, it's possible that the highly active brain catches a glimpse of changes taking place in the body before the waking mind becomes aware of them.
During the night, when things are a lot quieter, we're not so busy with all of the visuals and hearing and everything during the day, the body, the dreaming mind, can turn inward, do a scan of the body, see what might be disturbed or in any kind of disordered condition, and then bring up imagery to reflect that at night. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, allegedly always asked his patients about their dreams because he felt he could tell from the dreams some important clues as to how they would be functioning physically and what might be wrong with them medically.
It seems strange that we could pick up cues to illness in our dreams, but it's an actual fact. I think it's very important to be aware of the kinds of images that can occur in dreams that suggest danger for the body.
There's one case of a man whose dreaming brain sensed changes to his body, even though he'd lost the power of waking thought altogether. Towards the end of 1990, Jeffrey Lean, a journalist with the Observer newspaper, was admitted to hospital for routine surgery. During the operation, there were unexpected complications, and afterwards Lean fell into a coma.
Well, the next thing I remember really was being in a sort of dream world. There were two stages to it, really. One was being in a completely white or completely black world. And the black world was pitch black. And the white world was sort of rumpled, like rumpled sheets. That was one state. Then the other state was this very long, very intricate dream.
Lean was profoundly unconscious. Theoretically, he had no way of knowing what had happened to him. Despite this, his dream began to reflect the physical changes he'd undergone.
An awful lot of the dream was about being paralyzed and about being voiceless. It was quite extraordinary. One part was being in the south of France at some clinic or other for voiceless people, and Mrs. Thatcher was there. She'd lost her voice. But the awful thing was, as a journalist, I couldn't speak, so I couldn't get the story out. This is this wonderful news story, which I couldn't get out to the world. And I remember at one point I was stuck in a theatre seat. And I couldn't get out of that theatre seat because I was paralyzed. There was an awful lot of time I was being wheeled around in places, often in a bed, because I was paralyzed and I couldn't move. On one occasion, I was being trundled up through northern Canada on this bed, and then for some reason it sort of broke down, rather. And there I was, paralyzed on the bed. And I knew I was very close to death. And I was in the far north of Canada, and I knew that sooner or later I'd be tipped outside to die in the cold.
After 4 weeks, Lean began to regain consciousness. And when he finally came round, he found that, like Patricia Garfield's patients, his dreams had come true.
Because when I woke, I was both quadriplegic. I could only move my lips, my eyes, and the tips of my fingers, and even the tips of my fingers disappeared before long. And I couldn't speak because I'd had a tracheotomy here, and I was breathing through my neck. And so no air passed over my larynx, so I couldn't make any noise.
When Lean had last been conscious, he'd been a relatively healthy middle-aged man, about to have a routine operation for a twisted bowel. Without warning, he'd woken up in a world in which he could neither move nor speak. But strangely, he felt no distress.
One of the most extraordinary things about the dream was how merciful it was, and how it prepared me for the condition I was when I woke. You'd think that was absolutely terrifying thing to go from one state to the other state without anything in the middle. But in fact, the dream prepared me entirely for it. I knew how I would be when I woke up, because that is how I had been.
Since he emerged from the coma, Geoffrey Lean has made a complete recovery. He's a skeptical man by nature, but like Colette Donahue, he too believes that his dreams had a purpose. They helped him cope with the disaster that had befallen him, even before his conscious mind knew what had happened. And in a less dramatic way, this is the function dreams serve for us all. Whether or not our conscious minds are aware of our anxieties, our dreams help us to come to terms with our fears. The work of Professor Cartwright and others suggests that without dreams, we'd lose our psychological balance. So perhaps it's true that, in part at least, we sleep in order to dream. But there's one final aspect to Geoffrey Lean's story, which this theory doesn't explain. Coma is a state in which conscious thought is considered impossible. Coma patients never open their eyes, so they can't see their surroundings. This makes Lean's final dream difficult to understand.
As I was there, lying there paralyzed, I suddenly saw my wife. We talked, and she said something about, do you think you can make it or something? I said, well, I really don't think I can. And she said something very positive about, can you do it? And I again said, I don't think I can. And she said, why don't we ask the doctor? So then suddenly there was a doctor at the end of the bed. And the doctor said something immensely reassuring. And so I turned to my wife and said, okay, we'll give it a go. When I woke up, that doctor was the number 2 in intensive care, Dr. David Treacher. Same face, same voice, same white coat. How I'd taken that information, I don't know. But I'd never seen him before I went to the dream.
There's no record of Lean ever opening his eyes in the coma. So there's no obvious explanation as to why his dream should have contained images of a man he hadn't yet met. But some scientists believe that dreaming is an altered state of consciousness, in which it may be possible to access information not available to us through our ordinary senses. In next week's program, we'll examine these claims.
Next week's programme's at 9. There's a special Channel 4 guide to help you unlock the secrets of sleep. To order your copy, send a cheque or postal order for £2 payable to Channel 4 to A to Z of Sleep and Dreams. PO Box 4000, Manchester M60 3LL.